All right, we are live. What's going on, guys? Gonna let things kind of fill out a little bit here. Thanks for coming. Looks like an awesome slate, so excited to jump into it with you guys. Let's just give it a few more minutes, let some people trickle in here. Per usual, just throw any questions you guys have in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. Get this tweet out. All right. Give it a couple more seconds, guys. Let this tweet kind of marinate here, and then we'll get started. All right, so week 4, guys. Yeah, it's going to be an awesome slate. Really like how things are shaping up. I have kind of a narrow player pool. Considering I normally only play a few teams anyway at some of the higher stakes and smaller entry tournaments. I normally have a small player pool, but this week seems like kind of a clear path for certain games. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about this Cincinnati and Atlanta game, and then this New York Giants and Saints game, just because that's where a lot of the ownership is going to be condensed. Anytime that we have a slate like this where a lot of the primary weapons that we normally would be attacking, like the Pittsburgh game or the Vikings players, even like the Rams guys. So there's a lot of guys that have pretty high ceilings that aren't even on this main slate. So it kind of narrows what you can do is trying to find that ceiling. So it kind of led to a lot of similar plays, I think, that people are going to land on at the higher end. But let's just kind of go position by position just to start before we kind of touch on some of these game stack ideas. If you're just jumping in here, feel free to throw some questions over in the chat. I know a couple of you guys have already, so I'll definitely look at that. But yeah, just wanted to kind of chat about the positions, kind of what I'm doing in my early builds this morning, and then be sure and obviously check out Fantasy Labs. I have no affiliate links, anything like that, guys. Just think we have the best tools out there. Check out the props tool as well. That's something that I'm doing an article every Sunday morning, and then as well as the smaller slates as well for player props. But that's a good way to kind of gauge where the public is on certain players as well. So touching on quarterback, the guys that I'm interested in, Drew Brees at 6,600. If you can get there, I think he's a fantastic play. He's kind of being used similarly to like how Aaron Rodgers was last year when they just didn't have a running game. I think that things are going to change a little bit next week once Ingram's back, but definitely think we have one more week of Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara in a very condensed target share. So at 6,600, I talked about it last week with Mahomes, but paying up at quarterback, not something we typically like to do. But the thing is, DraftKings has really changed their pricing this year. So even paying all the way up for Breeze, he's one of the top priced quarterbacks, obviously. At 6,600, it's a lot different than it used to be when we were paying up for quarterbacks at like 8K. So I still think it's totally fine on a slate where there's a decent amount of value. So I'm definitely looking to get on Breeze if possible. If I'm moving down, it's probably going to be to a guy like Andy Dalton that all the way down at 5,400. I obviously like this Cincy Atlanta game quite a bit for kind of the same reasons that we're going to talk about with the Giants. It's just such a condensed target share. Gio Bernard, not really going to overthink this one against Atlanta. Just going to play him probably on all my teams. And then in general, like guys like Tyler Boyd, just probably still underpriced. So, I mean, if you're going to play Dalton with those guys, I think it makes sense. I don't think you have to play Dalton with Gio and with Boyd, but just gives you a little bit more correlation. If you're looking to kind of go after some of the other options in this Cincy game, I do like Tyler Eifert quite a bit. He's a little bit more expensive than some of the other tight ends that we're going to talk about, but kind of a more contrarian way to play. Cincy is Honestly, I don't think you really need to fade Gio, but if you didn't want to play Boyd, you could go to Eifert, who's going to get a lot of the similar targets in the middle of the field where Atlanta kind of funnels their offense. So if you want to pivot off of Dalton, I think Baker Mayfield, especially in tournaments at 5,300, really solid pivot, but his ownership's kind of picked up. Not that we really care a ton about ownership at quarterback, but at 5,300, he opens up a ton. Honestly, I'm really condensed at quarterback right now, guys. I'm basically in between those guys for the most part. Considering maybe Matt Ryan, maybe Deshaun Watson, but I'm probably not going to make it there. I'm going to kind of do everything I can to capture that upside with Breeze. So let's touch on the New Orleans game quickly as we kind of move through. So I really like this game. I probably like this game even better than the Bengals and Falcons game just because it's a later game, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility with late swap. I've talked about that quite a bit on a lot of my videos. So I do really like the New Orleans game for that reason. It's expensive to stack Breeze, Kamara, and Thomas. It's really hard to make a lineup you like doing that, in my opinion. So I think the best way to get your access to Michael Thomas is probably still through Drew Brees. Kamara, yeah, his price, it's still, I mean, it's 9,600 on DraftKings, but his role is just completely insane. Per usual, I'm going to have the tiebreaker go to the running back. That's just how I play. So I'm probably going to have Kamara in this game, and then obviously the Giants wide receivers, Odell Beckham. Sterling Shepard's going to be the massive chalk, but I think he's pretty good chalk. At 4,900, opens up a ton. Just exactly what we want as far as how to attack this New Orleans team. And again, condensed target share. It's just one of those weeks where we just have a lot of options where there's not a lot of other places to go, and that's the best kind of situation to attack. I think the pace in both these games is pretty good. So definitely on that. So as far as the other kind of outside players in this game, Ben Watson with this high team total, I do think is somewhat interesting, but his snap count was down a little bit last week. I don't think he's really in my top 4 for tight ends at this moment, but if you do want to get a little bit more added correlation in this game, I definitely think you can do that. Maybe take some shot on Ted Ginn in tournaments. The other guy that I'm really doing everything I can to play this morning is Saquon Barkley in this game. At 8,100, he's just seen a massive role in the passing game. He's got a really nice prop this morning as well. I think there's definitely a viable path to playing Barkley and Shepard on the other side of this game. So probably going to have a couple game stacks like that. I'm honestly even considering my main team kind of stacking up this game. So that's what I'm looking at. As far as other wide receivers that I wanted to kind of touch on quickly, I talked about Tyler Boyd. Calvin Ridley at 4,900. I'm not necessarily chasing that, to be honest. He could have a fine game, but I just prefer Shepard. I prefer Boyd in that price range. Geronimo Allison's interesting. Kind of still looking at the Randall Cobb situation. Looks like Larry Fitzgerald's going to play, or else I was kind of looking at Christian Kirk, another guy that's in the later games that would be kind of a nice pivot if he got behind. I think Quincy Enunwa was fine at 4,300, even against Jacksonville, just kind of how Enunwa was being used. I think he's a super high floor play. But yeah, I'm super condensed, guys. I was kind of on the Corey Davis train early in the week. I'm kind of cooling on that situation, kind of cooling on that game in general. Trubisky, Allen Robinson, Tyler Gabriel, I think that they're a good way to get access to some value. I just don't really know how high the ceiling is there. As far as Gabriel, his ADOT is relatively low. They like to try and get the ball in his hands, but they did take some deep shots with him. So I do think that at his price, if you can't make it to kind of this Shepard Boyd range for your wide receiver too, I think he's interesting. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on the main games. As far as the New England and Miami game, I think the best way to kind of attack this is go with the running backs for the Patriots, maybe have Gronk on that team as well. But I actually do kind of like Tannehill. Just the weapons for Miami is really tough. So if I'm going to try and soak up all the touchdowns from Miami, I'm probably going to go with like a Tannehill and Drake type stack and then bring it back with these Patriots guys. I think the running backs and Gronk make the most sense in that game. The Colts and Houston, that's going to be a really high pace game. Do like the Colts defense at 2,200. They just open up a ton. Pay down at defense more than not. I do really like Deshaun Deshaun Watson in some ways. So that's why this is kind of tough for me, at least from a game stack perspective. But I think Watson's in play just because of the rushing equity that he has. I think people are a little bit too down on him, to be honest. That offensive line has just been horrendous. And I do think Indy's defense is kind of underrated, but they are battling through some injuries right now. The one game I think that I'm a little bit lower on than the field is this Chargers and San Fran game. I think I just like some of the other options more than Melvin Gordon just because of how much they've used their other running backs as well. I do think Mike Williams is probably the best play in this game, but I just don't really love the San Francisco side of it. So whenever I'm kind of looking at a game stack, I want to be able to bring it back with at least one piece, and I'm not too excited with anyone on San Fran. So let's look at some news here, see if we missed anything. All right. So yeah, it looks like Cobb is going to be out as well. So yeah, I think Geronimo Allison's really strong. Another guy that if you really are kind of down for salary, I think that Ty Montgomery could kind of soak up a decent amount of that role in the slot as well. And he's super cheap on DraftKings. So he's kind of one of those guys that's used as a wide receiver anyway. So if you just think of him as a cheap wide receiver, any kind of carries you get on top of that are super, super nice. So yeah, let's jump into the chat. Might be a little bit shorter show today, guys. Going to try and do a little bit more mass multi-entry than I usually do. Just whenever I feel this confident about a core, I do like to play a little bit of mass multi-entry as well. So I got a few more lineups to make than usual today. So Mike Williams at 4,500 or Quincy Enunwa 4,300. Yeah, I think they're both really strong. I think Mike Williams is probably the guy for me. I don't think Travis Benjamin, even if he plays, really affects his role a whole lot. I think he affects Tyrell quite a bit more. Enunwa is probably safer just because of how he's being used. I don't really care about it being Jacksonville, to be honest, just because they're trying to get the ball in his hands on these short routes. So I think he's really strong at 4,300, especially on DraftKings. What's up, Laker? Can you play Matt Ryan with the Bengals weapons? Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue that I have with Atlanta is I get the Julio thing. This is probably the week he just goes nuts when everyone's on him last week. I guess really struggle with some of these weapons, to be honest. It's because of what we saw last week, how much they in theory can spread the ball around. Like Ridley, I get it, had 3 touchdowns, but trying to identify which player that's going to be is really tough. So Matt Ryan is a really good price. And then if we think that the Bengals target share is going to be way more condensed, you can definitely bring it back with those Bengals guys. Like I said from the start, I don't think you have to play Dalton with the Bengals guys. That's kind of where I got into trouble last week. I ended up playing Kareem Hunt because I wanted him with Mahomes, but really I should have just been fine playing Tyler Boyd and Gio Bernard without having Dalton. So that's something I'm looking at for sure. Mike Williams, yeah, really like Mike Williams in that range. Still probably prefer Boyd, prefer Shepard, but he's probably number 3 for me. I'm not even ruling out the idea of having 3 of the cheaper mid-range wide receivers, just so I can get up to like the Kamara, Barkley range with Gio. I think that's a really solid way to go in lineup construction for sure. Sounds like your general contest selection are smaller entries, single GPPs, thought process. Generally create a cash lineup with a 2v2. Yeah, so I talked about this a decent amount. I don't think it's necessarily single entry GPPs. It's more playing smaller field sizes where I think matters the most. So if you play a really small field size, I do think you can kind of start with mostly a cash game approach with maybe one tweak for extra correlation. So I think that's really solid. I think people get a little bit too contrarian in these small fields, and it's really easy to find leverage in the later games if you get behind. But if you can start what you think is optimal, that's typically what I try to do. Rhett Ellison, yeah, not really on him, to be honest. I get it with kind of the injuries and stuff like that, but I think that there's better ways to pay down today. Any other questions, guys? I'm going to kind of fly through a few more things here, but then I'm going to let you guys go build your lineups, and then I got a decent amount more to do today as well. Got some exciting stuff for the coming weeks. I'm going to be doing some collaboration stuff as far as these live shows. Thanks to everyone for kind of coming through these last couple weeks and asking questions. These are really fun shows for me to do as well. So I guess we didn't touch on tight end a ton. Do really like Eric Ebron at 3,600, but it's not like he's as cheap as some of these other guys that you could realistically go down to. I do think Ebron's probably the safest play, probably the best play. But I do like Njoku, especially if you want to play some Cleveland stacks. And then in general, I think that Tyler Eifert, just because everyone's playing Boyd, everyone's playing Gio, he's probably the guy that you use for leverage in that game. Gronk, 7K, like, yeah, I get it. I don't play Gronk a ton just because I prefer to use my salary at running backs and even some of these elite wide receivers. But really good spot for him, especially if Josh Gordon can kind of open up the middle of the field a bit. Interested in Austin Hooper just because of his price, 2,900. The team total there obviously is one of the highest on the slate. So I'm looking into Hooper at 2,900 if I really need the salary. And then he's just going to be one of the guys in this game that's going to be a lot lower owned for sure. If you do have kind of a mid-range salary left over at tight end, I think Jared Cook at 4,100 makes a lot of sense. Really like him on FanDuel when he's priced really well. So he's priced at 5,400, like the same exact price range as Ebron, with a relatively decent target share as well for Oakland's. I think if you're going to stack up the Cleveland game, probably bringing it back with Jared Cook is the way to go. Ebron or Njoku, yeah, it's a price thing. Probably Ebron if you had the salary, but Njoku, definitely a lower floor, but I do think that there's going to be more chances taken through the middle of the field now that Tyrod is not under center. So I do like Njoku quite a bit based on his price. Mike Evans, yeah, I'm actually not really huge on this game, to be honest. I think it's a really tough offensive line matchup for Tampa Bay. They've been kind of making their living by these long passes, and I just think that I have a lot of respect for this pass rush for Chicago. So I'm kind of on the Chicago defense side of this game. I'm not really super interested in taking any shots on Tampa Bay. I think this is the week they regress. What are your thoughts on having lineups with popular players from the highest total games? Everyone will have Boyd, Shepard, Dalton. Yeah, so two things. One way that I think you can get access to some of these chalk players and still be unique is by game stacking. So you can game stack some of these games, but if you want to really get contrarian, maybe you game stack one of the other games and you kind of surround it with some of these chalk plays. Another thing that I do like to do in large field tournaments, if there's like clear chalk at a position, not necessarily running back. So let's just use Cincinnati, for example. Boyd is going to be very highly owned. I like the idea of playing Dalton, Eifert, AJ Green, and Gio, and leaving Boyd off of that stack, so that if for some reason he fails and the touchdowns all go to Eifert or go to Green, you're still gaining a ton of leverage there. Gio's usage is probably pretty safe, so I'm more or less more interested in fading a wide receiver in general when looking at those game stacks. All right, guys, probably going to call it for now. Going to go make some teams, but good luck everyone in week 4. Check out Fantasy Labs, obviously, and if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell as well so that next time we go live, you'll be notified. And yeah, so we're going to have some exciting stuff this coming week, so be sure and keep an eye out for that. And good luck, everyone, in week 4. Yeah, good talk. See you guys.